So I grew up in a fairly normal family by any outside judgment. We lived a happy middle class life until when I was 11, my dad died by suicide. And that really upended my entire world. What I did not know was that my mom had for years been struggling with her own substance use disorder. It was only after my dad died that became apparent to my brother and to me that she was really struggling. My mom was a lovely person when she was sober. She was very kind, compassionate, caring. When she was drinking, she was the exact opposite. She was destructive and violent. So we were put into the foster care system here in Utah, and eventually I made a choice that I just needed to get out. So I went to the University of Washington in Seattle. That's where my own struggles with mental health really started to manifest. I had never felt that depth of despair before, or loneliness, and I didn't know what to do with it. So eventually I returned back to Salt Lake and ended up back living with my mom again in her home with my mom, my brother, and I. And we just were this very dysfunctional family. One morning, my mom had been working as a nurse, nights and weekends because of the pay differential. So it wasn't abnormal for me to not see her for days on end. But after a few days, I hadn't seen her, and so I started to wonder about her. And so I went into her room. It was a Sunday morning, and I found her passed away. So by the time that I was 27, I had lost both of my parents. I again made an attempt to escape my problems by moving away. I took a job on the East Coast and just continued to drink and use drugs the way that I had been. And that eventually devolved into a situation where I was living homeless on the streets of Washington, D.C. I was in absolute desperation. All I could think about was where my next drink or drug would come from. That was my main focus. And I was so isolated from everyone else in the world. I felt like I had no one that loved or cared about me, and that I was all alone. Prior to that point, I'd always thought that suicide was a selfish act, because as a kid, that's how I constructed it. With my father's suicide. Having now had that experience myself of been to that point where I, got so disconnected, so depressed and isolated and alone, that I would be doing everyone that I knew a favor by ending my own life. I thought that people would be better off without me. Much to my dismay, I woke up from that. I didn't die, and just out of sheer coincidence, a friend from high school called me a few days later and said, hey Evan, how are you doing? Want to check in? And it was the first time I got really honest with someone and told them what was going on. And I said, listen, my life's in shambles. I don't know what to do. And she said, can you get to an airport? And I said, yeah, I think I can do that. They flew me back here to Salt Lake City and quickly realized that I was a mess and that I needed more treatment than friends could provide. I was really biased against the rooms of recovery meetings. I felt like when I went into those settings, I was just as much of as an outsider as ever. But what I discovered was that there is a huge sea of people who really understand what it's like, who have been there themselves, and who have felt just as isolated and different and alone as I have ever felt. I'm just one of many people that feel that level of isolation, that level of loneliness. That alone can be a point of connection. It can be a point of healing. We're kind of like the survivors of a shipwreck, that everyone, it doesn't matter who you are, we're all celebrating the fact that we made it here. We're still alive when we made it through a very difficult time in our lives, and we can do it together. Every day brings its own unique challenges, and some days I can say that I am a person in long-term recovery, and I am absolutely on fire with recovery and hope and optimism for the world that's laid out before me. And some days I just don't pick up a drink. And both of those days are wins to me. And so what life is like for me today is that now I'm the Community Outreach and Empowerment Coordinator for USARA, which means I get to do all the fun stuff. I get to do all our cool events, do advocacy, I oversee our volunteer program, things that I never dreamed capable. Because what I've seen happen in my life is I've seen a fellowship of people grow up around me that have really loved me and supported me every step of the way. And family to me is a very loose definition, because it's not necessarily the group of people I was born into, but it's the group of people I choose to call family. And it's the people that love me unconditionally and that I love back. And that was a capacity that I thought that I had lost. But here I stand today saying that I'm capable of loving people and being loved.